I came home earlier than usual after a short parent-teacher meeting. The hallway smelled like warm bread from a bakery down the street. I stood at our bedroom door and froze. The lamp was still on. Daniel and Rachel were tangled on our bed, jeans on the floor, their laughter frozen in a way that made my throat close. Eli's baby monitor buzzed faintly from the nursery, a high little sound that felt like a timing device. My hands shook so badly I fumbled for my phone. I clicked one photo, then another, because I couldn't believe my eyes. Before I could scream, someone knocked sharply at the front door. My heart jumped into my throat. Who would be at our house at this hour? I slid the phone into my pocket, the picture pressed warm by my leg. I walked into the nursery to check Eli. He lay curled under a small blanket, feverish and breathing shallow. I tried to keep calm so he wouldn't wake frightened. Daniel met my eyes in the doorway with a face that showed too little shame. I realized in that cold second how fragile everything was. The babysitter called. The knock had been her. She sounded breathless and small over the line, telling me Eli's fever spiked. I dropped my car keys and ran, the image of the bed still burning behind my eyes. Daniel stumbled after me and tried to say something, but I ignored him and checked Eli first. My son was pale, but sleep took him even with the fever. Daniel's mouth moved. I took a breath and listened. The phone on his nightstand buzzed with a new text while we stood there. He glanced at it, a flash of fear passing before he covered it. I asked who it was. He muttered that it was work. Then the screen lit up and the message showed, "When are we finishing our plan?" and a name I did not know scrolled below. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just laughter or a mistake, it smelled of plotting. I pressed my thumb to Eli's small palm and felt the heat. I had a photo of the bed in my pocket but no plan. I told myself to breathe and to not make any scenes with Eli awake. I would wait and watch, for now. That night I retreated to the office on the quiet side of the house. My hands still felt too loud. I opened our shared family calendar to look for a mistake. There it was, blocked weekends, hotel reservations, and entries simply labeled Rachel time. The letters were neat, the kind of entries someone made without thinking twice. I asked Daniel about the calendar and he laughed, saying it had synced wrong with some old account. He pushed the explanation off like a coat. I remembered every bill we had paid together, the passwords I kept, the hidden PIN for our safe. I slipped his laptop into sleep mode and used my memory of his login patterns. His email box opened to a private account I had never seen before. Flight confirmations popped up for a city we had no business going to. I read each line slowly, like a person tracing a map backwards. Who did he think he was hiding this from? The world tilted in my hands. A receipt showed up on the screen that made my chest thud. A $75,000 wire to a Shell LLC labeled consulting. The company name matched a vendor in Daniel's startup ledgers. My finance muscle tightened, the part of me that had learned to read patterns and weak stories. Transfers, invoices, and round numbers linked like dots across a page. I texted him for an explanation. His reply was short and cold, "It's none of your business." Eli started to cry from the nursery, a small keening that made everything worse. I felt both betrayed and afraid. This was not only emotional, it was a hole in our life that could swallow money and truth. I remembered the bills I had paid, the mortgage forms signed at midnight, the way Daniel once praised me for catching a shorthand error that saved us thousands. How deep did his betrayal go? I opened a spreadsheet and began to map dates and amounts. The house felt both large and dangerous. At dinner I tried to force calm into my voice. I asked Daniel about the calendar and the wire receipt. He laughed like someone swatting a fly, then turned harsh, calling me paranoid. Rachel called during that tense pause and said, "We need to talk." I heard the strain in Eli's small whimper and decided I would not make a scene while he was awake. Calm, I asked for access to our joint accounts. Daniel refused. He said I was meddling. If he would not share the money details, I thought, then I would have to find the means to make them shared. I had to think like I used to at my old finance desk. Quietly, precisely, without alarms. I remembered a few legal paths, emergency motions, freezes, subpoena power. But I also knew Daniel's next move might be to lock everything tighter or to run. He looked too sure of himself across the table, like a man with a private map. My hands tightened on my fork until my knuckles went white. I promised myself then, softly, that Eli would be safe. That night I rummaged through the bedroom while Daniel showered. My hands found small things, receipts, crumbs, a feather from the comforter. Taped under the mattress a slim envelope weighted like a confession. Inside was an address in a tax haven, a safe deposit box number, and a half-scratched note with 4R. Daniel's handwriting on the journal page curled in ways that meant something to only him. Cold dread spread through me like ice. I took photos, copied the details, and then slipped everything back where I had found it. I needed proof, not theater. The next morning an anonymous padded package arrived for Daniel, marked urgent. He did not mention it. Who was watching them now? I thought of the layered steps people take when hiding money, shell companies, offshore boxes, middleman signatures. I felt a curious, sick thrill of recognition. This was not simple adultery. It was a plan with maps and routes. I began to write every discovery down in a small notebook I kept hidden in my closet. The babysitter was gentle but talkative when I cornered her with a cup of coffee. Her name was Lila and she looked tired but honest. After I offered a small hush gift, she told me Rachel had visited many nights while Eli slept. Rachel had come quietly, she said, and Daniel would take her out to pick up contracts. Lila handed me a shaky video Rachel sent her once, Daniel and Rachel on our wedding anniversary, reviewing a laptop that hummed with spreadsheets. The clip was small and fuzzy but the timing lined up with the calendar entries. Lila's voice quavered when she admitted she had been paid extra to keep quiet. I felt anger and relief braided together. Now I had a timeline, visits, laptop meetings, sudden transfers. Rachel might be leaving trails, but those trails were proof. I filed the small video into my hidden folder and added notes about dates. Each small fact made the pattern clearer. Still, I wondered if Rachel was clever or cornered. Was she setting herself up as a witness? Or was she dancing too close to fire? I messaged Rachel and wrote a tone like I used when we were girls, soft and open. She replied with sugar-sweet words that tasted false. I invited her to coffee at a neutral place. When I saw her, she flinched the moment our eyes met. Her apology sounded practiced. Then she surprised me. She was shaking and admitted things I had not expected. Daniel had promised to cut her in on a property deal, she said, and she had documents that proved he moved money. Rachel spoke quickly with a voice that tried to be honest and frightened. Her own rent was overdue because Daniel forgot to pay. She begged me for help with the legal name on some files because she was scared Daniel would turn on her. My mind fought between hate and strategy. Could I trust her? If she would testify, her papers could show the wire trail. If she lied, she could sink me deeper. I told her to bring everything she had and sat very still. I needed witnesses and I needed truth. For my son, I would take risks I had not known I could carry. I called an old colleague from my finance days who had become a lawyer. He picked up on the second ring and answered in that calm voice I needed. I told him the short version quietly. He did not gasp or judge. He listened like a man who measured words for a living. You don't have to tolerate this, he said bluntly. He explained steps, a freeze of accounts, emergency custody petitions, subpoenas for records. He warned me about the prenup Daniel had been drafting. He said prenups could be ironclad when prepared with certain lawyers. I felt a cold hand close around my throat at that mention. But he also said things that felt like a map. Collect evidence, secure chain of custody, get temporary orders. He owed me a favor from years ago, he said, and he would help quietly at first. I felt a mix of relief and a new tension. If I moved, Daniel's legal team might move faster. He was a public figure at the startup and had a lawyer with a reputation for being ruthless. I told him to begin slowly and to prepare for quick action. That same afternoon Daniel served divorce papers. He always seemed to time the worst things perfectly. The prenup was attached, signed 3 months before Eli was born. It looked airtight in an instant. I read the words and felt the air leave me. It promised most assets to him in case of separation, a clause that made me nearly sick with the loss of what we had together. But when my finance instincts sharpened, I noticed a missing date on a key signature and bank statements that did not match his claimed income at the time. There might be a way to challenge the prenup if I could prove he had hidden assets or falsified income information. I called my lawyer, and we prepared an emergency temporary order request that night. It felt like trying to plant a stake on moving ground. Would the judge listen to a wife floundering under the weight of a documented agreement? I sat up late, writing questions and compiling a modest list of the bank changes, the wire transfers, and the secret emails. I made a binder that felt like armor. I converted a laundry bag into a makeshift evidence kit and filled it with calendar screenshots, flight confirmations, receipts, the babysitter's shaky video, and Rachel's documents. I also began saving voicemails and texts where Daniel bragged or hinted at money he did not explain. Each item felt like a thread to pull. When I handed the binder to my lawyer, his eyes narrowed as he flipped through pages. "This can sink him," he said quietly, "but he'll fight like hell." I felt equal parts terrified and ready. He told me to slow down and copy everything on multiple drives to store one off-site. I felt the odd thrill of control. The binder would travel with me to court, and its contents would speak where I could not. I slept badly that night, thinking of the scene at the bedroom door, the hush of the baby monitor, the warm weight of Eli in my arms. I told him he was safe. I told myself this was only the beginning. My lawyer called with alarm the next morning. A bank had flagged an odd freeze request on an account in Daniel's name from an anonymous party. Someone was trying to hide or extract money. The pattern matched nightly transfers to shell companies and a jeweler where Rachel's name surfaced in invoices. Felt like a net tightening. My lawyer filed subpoenas immediately for the shell companies and corporate accounts. That night I watched Daniel in the kitchen as if he were a stranger making tea. He packed a small duffel and tried to act normal. I watched the movements in his face, the way his jaw worked. Was he about to vanish with money? I photographed the duffel in case he actually tried. I told Lila to be ready to take Eli out if anything felt off. The house had become a chessboard and I felt both the hunger to move and the weight of consequences. Still, I held close the binder I had made. It might be the only thing keeping me from being gaslit into silence. Daniel did not come home that night. I called dozens of times and got voicemail each time. At 2 a.m., an unknown number texted me a photo of Daniel and Rachel in a taxi, bruised with laughter, captioned, "Starting the new life." I sat on the stairs and let the cold fill me. I drove to my parents' house and made a gentle lie to an aunt that Daniel was visiting a hospitalized grandparent to create an alibi of his absence, because I could not let it look like I was chasing him. I also called the police to file a report about potential asset flight, noting the suspicious transfers and the duffel. The next morning the startup stock tanked after a whistleblower post accused the company of funneling investor money to secret trusts. Was Rachel the whistleblower? Or had I moved in behind scenes for an emergency freeze? The chaos spun outward like a sudden storm. I saw Daniel on television that day looking stunned. The house felt both empty and full of whispers. The whistleblower post went viral and the startup's name bled across headlines. It accused the company of moving investor funds into luxury purchases and secret trusts. Daniel flew back and blamed a disgruntled ex-CTO. Investors demanded audits and the board called emergency meetings. My lawyer handed me a court order to freeze corporate accounts pending discovery. I watched Daniel crumble on interviews while anger and a strange relief warred inside me. This scandal might be the only leverage strong enough to force the truth. But who had posted the whistleblower note? I had not pushed anything public yet. My lawyer advised caution. Had Rachel leaked in revenge? Had someone else on the inside snapped? I held my breath and waited. I had to be careful. Every move I made could be painted as motive. For now, the world watched Daniel and his empire tremble. I watched him in return and I felt a small cold sense of justice. Rachel arrived at my door shaking and gave me a recording. It was Daniel's voice on the tape telling her, "If she ever finds out, we'll say it was her poor memory." In the recording he admitted to shifting money and planning to move Eli to another state to make custody harder. Rachel begged to be away from him, terrified of his threats. I recorded her statement on my phone and asked my lawyer if it would be admissible. He said it might be if we could show a proper chain of custody and prove Rachel had not edited it. Rachel promised to testify. That night someone slashed her car tires. I drove to see the shredded rubber and her shaken face. Fear tightened like a fist in my chest. If Rachel was being silenced, the danger was real and immediate. I offered her a place to stay and arranged for safekeeping of her documents. Her presence made me feel both nearer to the truth and in deeper danger. Daniel filed an emergency motion claiming I was unstable and dangerous, using staged photos of me yelling taken during a heated but private argument, and twisted them into proof of instability. The court granted a temporary shared custody order. Eli began spending nights with Daniel, and it gutted me in a way words could not hold. I watched my son go each week and learned to count the hours until he returned. I needed a dramatic move to stop Daniel from moving Eli across state lines. My lawyer suggested hotel footage that might show neglect, and I hired an investigator to find videos showing where Daniel actually took Eli. If we could show he left Eli unattended or acted recklessly, the judge might deny long-distance moves. My fear turned into focus. I mapped out weekends, cross-checked dates with the calendar, and waited for the investigator's call like an anchor. I could not lose my son to a plan made in secret. The investigator found hotel footage from a weekend Daniel had told me he was working. In the video, he arrived with Eli, then walked into a conference room and left the child in the lobby. Hours passed before he returned, and Eli looked agitated and tired. The footage showed a man rushing back with a small boy who held a stuffed animal and a face that had been trying to sleep. This footage became a linchpin for our neglect claim. Daniel's excuse later was shaky. He said he had a meeting and thought the staff would watch Eli. At the same time, a high-profile investor sued the company for missing funds and the timeline became messy. Did the judge care more about money or the child's safety? I prepared both lines of argument, that Daniel endangered Eli by prioritizing work and that he hid assets to remove financial support from me. It felt like stacking truth on truth until the scales might tip. I found a hospital bill for Eli in Daniel's name for an ER visit he never mentioned. The record showed an unusual sedative had been administered while Eli was under Daniel's care. The thought of my small boy under a sedative made my chest tighten. I requested a forensic medical review and added the records to our custody petition. Daniel's lawyer called the move a smear and angrily demanded the records be sealed. The judge ordered a private home evaluation and a medical review to look into whether Eli had been mishandled or left in unsafe situations. I sat in the waiting room beside a woman with a tiny carrier and prayed the evaluator would see what I saw at home. Stress, too much work, not enough care. I kept a quiet count of Eli's little habits like hand-sucking and how he slept. The waiting felt like a small war. I hoped the truth of small things would matter on paper. The court evaluator surprised us with testimony from a daycare provider who had once seen Daniel refuse to give Eli his medication. She submitted a statement describing instances she felt Daniel's behavior was unpredictable, and his obsession with the startup had taken priority over Eli. The evaluator's report noted stress and insufficient caregiving when Daniel's work consumed him. The judge granted me temporary custody pending trial and ordered mediation. Daniel issued a public apology that went viral, polished and precise. I did not trust its timing. My lawyer told me this shift mattered. The public apology softened some community support for Daniel and gave us momentum. I felt the small relief of a door opening. I also felt the work ahead. Discovery, depositions, and a trial to show how Daniel had hidden assets and planned a life away from my son. Each step felt heavy and decisive. A retired forensic accountant joined our team and found a wire trail. Funds meant for product development had been routed to a shell LLC, then used to buy private real estate listed under an alias connected to Rachel. Luxury watches and diamonds traced back to personal accounts Daniel labeled discretion. I filed a motion to pierce the corporate veil, arguing the assets were deliberately concealed marital property. Daniel hired his own forensic team and the courtroom calendar filled with motions. The accountant's maps showed lines that looked like braids, connecting company funds to private pockets. My lawyer said this evidence could break the prenup strength if we proved fraud and intent to hide marital assets. We prepared to show the judge that the money hidden beneath corporate sheets was really ours. I felt a strange surge of hope. The money trail could be the key to securing Eli's future and mine. At a deposition, Daniel's former CFO sat across from us and dropped a shock. He had signed off on transfers under pressure from Daniel and marked them as marketing expenses. The CFO agreed to turn state's evidence after I offered immunity and witness protection. He handed over emails and a ledger where Daniel tried to sign Eli over to Rachel in a private trust months earlier. That revelation felt like a blade across my life. The goal had been clear: Keep Eli and the fortune away from me. The judge, reading the affidavit, looked stunned. Daniel filed for emergency asset protection the next day, trying to box our moves in legal red tape. I felt both fury and the hollow ache of betrayal. But the CFO's testimony changed everything. It exposed deliberate concealment and plans that went beyond an affair. This was theft with a child as pawn. I prepared for a hearing that would decide not just money, but who would raise my son. Trial day felt like stepping into a different world. The courtroom became an arena where people wore careful faces and lawyers sharpened words like knives. I sat in a plain blouse while Daniel called PR-savvy witnesses. My lawyer played Rachel's recording and Lila's babysitter video. The forensic accountant laid out the wire map like an artist revealing a picture. When the judge ordered temporary forfeiture of key accounts and granted me exclusive custody pending the case's end, the gallery gasped. Daniel's face went white. He looked like a man realizing his map had been found. His lawyer immediately accused me of tampering with evidence. The room hummed with tension while the judge requested proofs of chain of custody. I felt exposed and steady at once. The judge's words gave me Eli that week in my arms and a little breathing space. Still, the case was not over. The final documents would decide how much of Daniel's hiding would become mine to try to recover. On the eve of closing arguments, I found one last file Daniel had thought deleted. It was a signed confession showing he had transferred investor funds into offshore accounts as a short-term loan to cover a business collapse he knew about. It was time-stamped 2 weeks before he met Rachel. My hand shook as I scanned it and then gave it to the judge in a sealed motion through my lawyer. The courtroom lit up with tension. Investors who had been wavering joined our civil complaint, saying they had been duped. Daniel's lawyers scrambled, but the documents were clear. Intentional concealment, false statements, plans to use company money as his private reserve. I felt like a woman standing at the end of a road she had not chosen but had to walk. The judge scheduled a hearing for equitable distribution and punitive damages. I worried if the damages would be enough for Eli's future, but I also felt a deep sense that the truth had at last arrived at the table. The judge's ruling felt like light through a long window. He found Daniel liable for fraud and ordered him to relinquish controlling shares, pay punitive damages, and hand over concealed assets. The court awarded me full custody of Eli, and a multimillion-dollar settlement from seized accounts, and a dissolved trust meant for Rachel. Daniel was barred from executive roles in order to repay investors. Officers carried away boxes from his office while the press swarmed and cameras flashed. Rachel was indicted for receiving stolen funds and she collapsed in court. In a moment that stopped my breath, she looked at me and asked for forgiveness. I felt my chest loosen and tighten. I had won custody and money, but the sight of Rachel's broken face made me feel strange. What did forgiveness look like when the price had been my trust and a boy's childhood? I held Eli and tried to feel only gratitude. Months later, I sat on our porch with Eli and watched him play with a neighbor's child. I ran a nonprofit that helped betrayed spouses rebuild, funded by the settlement and a trust for Eli. Daniel lived in a small apartment, paying lawyers and facing bankruptcy and humiliation. Rachel served community restitution and issued a public apology. I sealed the last legal file and scanned the evidence binder into a secure archive before deleting the local copy. I wanted the record kept safe but not loud. The money had given me safety and a way to help others, not revenge. A neighbor's child ran up to Eli and he looked over with bright eyes and said, "Mama, you won." My phone buzzed with a message from an old friend asking for help. I typed back 2 words. "I'm here." The quiet victory sat like a steady stone in my chest. I had my son's safety and independence. That was everything.